I do want to say this is actually the 12th webinar that we've done. We started in March last year, so this is our anniversary webinar. There you go. And we've had a great slate of topics. You can find all of those on the website. And these webinars are all about building local resilience, local empowerment of all topics that you can think of. We've covered a lot of ground. Today's going to be a fascinating one on rural skills, traditional knowledge, reskilling, upskilling. It's been called a lot of different things. First, a little bit about who is Center for Local Prosperity. We're a registered charity. We work across Atlantic Canada. This is our 12th year, and we advise governments, local communities, a whole lot of different people, nonprofits, and so on resilience and relocalization, and particularly around the idea of community wealth building. And how do you contain, capture, and grow the wealth of different kinds within the community? You know, it's the leaky bucket syndrome. And how do you plug up the leaks and really make your community as strong as it can be? So that's a lot of what we do. You can find a whole lot of content on our website, different studies, different, all kinds of videos, you name it. It's a lot of stuff going on there. Today, in the next hour, as I mentioned, we are going to talk about rural skills. And I have to say that given what's going on globally with global affairs, this is particularly timely, learning about how do we build our skills base locally, personally, locally, in the neighborhood, in the community. You know, it comes down to how do you build stuff, make stuff, fix stuff, grow stuff. That's really what it comes down to. How versatile and resilient can you be in all your neighbors, and how can you teach them? And we've got some great, inspiring guests today that are going to talk about that and some of the work that they've done, this particularly important type of work. I'm going to introduce them. I do want to suggest that you put questions in the chat box. Nike, our communications coordinator, will be monitoring those. We will have time at the end to pull those out, but I think we're going to have a fascinating discussion. I want to introduce our three guests. Jennifer DeCoste. She is going to represent Life.School.House, which is an internationally scaled nonprofit network of barter-based folk schools. We're going to learn about what that is. She also in 2021 co-founded Firelock Gathering Place and Retreat near Antigonish, and she's the first Atlantic Canadian Fellow to win the prestigious Ashoka Fellowship. Secondly, we have Dawn Matheson. Dawn, thank you for joining us from being away. With the Ulnooweg Education Center, she's going to talk about reskilling and language revitalization. She collaborates with Mi'kmaq elders and community members to design and deliver land-based programming focused on food security, food sovereignty, and Indigenous youth empowerment, and weaving in the learning of the Mi'kmaq language through all of that. She's also quite a busy camper, as I understand, Dawn. Masters of Education in Culturally Responsive Pedagogy at St. FX. So definitely keeping yourself busy. And third, we have Brynn Baneberry with Crows Commons Co-operative. It's going to talk about reskilling through queer craft skill shares. They're the co-founder of Crows Commons Co-operative, a land sharing co-op developing rural affordable housing for queer, trans, and disabled community members. And they are also a founding board member of 644 Revitalization Network, which is a community development organization in the New Germany area. And Bryn, I understand you're also quite busy with the New Germany Farmers Market. And I've got to get there myself one of these days to check it out. Okay, All's good. Why don't we get underway? I'm going to ask each of you to just give us maybe 4 minutes on just background on what you do, and then we can get into a discussion. So I think I'll go in reverse order. Brynn, why don't you start out?
Sure. Thank you, Bob, and thanks for that introduction. So, as Bob said, I'm a co-founder of Crows Commons Co-operative. So a little bit more about what that is we're a land sharing co-op and we're located in Springfield, Nova Scotia. So that's kind of halfway between the South Shore and the Valley, so right inland. And our focus is on queer, trans, and disabled folks across sort of three areas, one being farming, one being art, and one being housing. And as Bob mentioned in my intro, we're working on developing an affordable housing development here. But today's is kind of more relevant to that art component to what we're doing. So last summer of 2025, we hosted Queer Craft Skillshares. So what that looked like is we had people out 3 days throughout the summer, and each day had two Skillshares paired together. So we brought folks out here onto the land, and they got to participate in two Skillshares throughout the day. And what was covered is we did paper making, we did cordage, we did felting, cyanotype, wood carving, and natural dyeing. So it was all sort of surrounded around uh, craft skills that were related to like land-based arts or land-based practices. And it was all hands-on learning. Folks got to use the skill and then take something away with them at the end. We had a shared meal in the middle. We're also sort of focusing on that community building aspect of learning skills together. And it was also an attempt to support queer artists in delivering workshops. So not only building the craft skills themselves, but also providing an atmosphere where people can work on their own skills of delivering presentations and workshops and sharing their learnings with others. And the impact of it was really awesome. So we had about 17 people come out to each one. And there was a bit of overlap. So I think overall there was probably like 35 folks who attended throughout the summer. And we all developed our skills. We've heard that folks have taken those skills away and continue to use them in their own art practice. We've heard that some of our workshop facilitators have gone on to do these workshops in more spaces after having the support to develop them through this program. And one of the, I think, most special parts of it is just like we heard over and over how this was the first time people had been in a rural space with so many other queer and trans folks. And just the impact of that community building in that place was really impactful for folks. So I'll talk a bit more throughout Bob's questions, but I did want to give a chance to just show a couple photos of what they look like because I think they give a sense of the atmosphere that we created with these skill shares. So these are the group photos showing the crafts that we made. So this day was the wood carving and natural dyeing. And this one was paper making and cordage. And this one was cyanotyping and felting. And then I just have some photos to show the process. So I actually led the paper making workshop. In fact, this is paper behind me here on the wall. And so we use things from the land as well. The bottom right one here is knotweed that we had collected and prepped and experimented with paper making around that. And then on the top left here, you see the paper making frames, which folks got to take home with them in terms of like the equipment they need to do some at-home paper making. This was felting, the cyanotype again, having folks go out onto the land and gather materials and then bring back and together make these cyanotype prints. And then wood carving. And we had a facilitator who was able to come and had all the equipment because it was a bit, there's some more specialized tools that come with the wood carving option. So yeah, it was a really beautiful experience this past summer, and we were able to do it. We had some support through an Artists and Communities grant, which is unfortunately one of the grant streams that I believe is being cut in this budget. But that was not necessary, but helped support the process, having a bit of funding behind it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Brynn. Boy, those wooden spoons right at the end caught me because we probably have 8 of them in our kitchen and always looking for another good one. And I got to learn how to make one of these. That's a skill that I need to learn. Yeah, so there you go. You never know enough in life, I think. So thank you very much. Dawn, how about you? If you tell us what you've been doing.
So, well, Alan, Bob, for having me, but I just wanted to make a note that I love the fact that, Bryn, you're creating a safe space for people to be able to learn the skills because I feel us at Ulnooweg are kind of doing the same thing. It's just a little bit different. So, my role at Ulnooweg is to be able to help support people with food security and food sovereignty. And the way I look at the two is I always try to explain food security is having your next meal, but food sovereignty is being able to have what you would like for the next meal. So I work with a lot of Mi'kmaq communities in Nova Scotia. So for them to be able to have the food security is just as important as having the food sovereignty. So the language, we're probably about 2 generations, I would say, away from skills, traditional knowledge, culture, um, and language. And because residential schools has only been approximately, 2 generations back. Now that doesn't say that we've lost it all. And I say we as I'm non-Indigenous, but I live in Mi'kmaq community. My husband is Indigenous and so are my children. So I tend to include myself because I feel like I'm part of that community, right? But I work with a lot of elders, but we haven't lost all of the knowledge. We haven't lost all of the language. They haven't lost all of the skills. So the best thing to do is learning from our elders, right? Learning from those that have done it for years. So I'm able to create a space. Ernest Johnson is a very well-known elder in Eskasoni First Nations, and him and I get together and we talk about everything you can imagine when it comes to food security and food sovereignty. And so with this, he starts to teach me some of the language, excuse me, as well. So from that, we developed, or this idea blossomed of being able to do 2 things: creating a safe space for people to learn their language and creating a safe space for people to come and learn cultural knowledge, which comes back to, I think Bob had put on the poster, somebody had put on the poster, it says blamu, which is the Mi'kmaq word for salmon. So unfortunately, we had a workshop in Budladek, no, sorry, in Buckingeg, just outside Antigonish, for harvesting blamu, so to go salmon fishing and to be able to fillet it, and then we were going to smoke it. And with this, a lot of the Mi'kmaq language is verb based. So with it, as you were working, as you were doing those verb type things, that's where a lot of the language comes from. So it just clicked, right, to be able to do this. And Ernest and I have been doing different workshops all over Nova Scotia. Anything from food preservation to gardening to hunting, fishing, trapping, anything like that. And we were fortunate enough to have one in Millbrook First Nations, and it was really, really good. We had a backyard butchering workshop. So to give you a little bit of backstory of Millbrook, Millbrook is still in the town limits of Truro, but we have a deer call every year because the deer is overpopulated with, or the town is overpopulated with deer. So they have a call every year, and any of the deer that anybody from First Nations or from Millbrook gets, it goes back to the community. Any of the deer that I believe the town gets would go on to feed Nova Scotia. So it's a really great way to get community involved, community back together. And it's, like I always say, anybody can shoot a deer, whether it's with a bullet or whether it's with a bow and arrow. Anybody can do that. But then a lot of people are lacking the knowledge of what do I do next? And in these times, things are getting expensive, and not everybody has the money in their back pocket to be able to go and take their deer to a butcher. And then the other thing is, you guys probably already noticed, is there a butcher close enough to help, right? And then you got to go through all the different things that the government has put forth in order to be able to process wild game in a facility that's done for like beef or chicken or whatever. And so we had this one. It was great because they learned how right from the beginning, from skinning and processing to cutting it up to vacuum sealing it. And we even did drying. We taught them how to dry the hide, right? So it was awesome and it was great, and it's a safe space for people to learn the language as well. So yeah, so I don't know if that's everything, and now I can just get off because I told everything that you're gonna ask me questions about or what, but
Oh, I'm sure there's going to be more, Dawn. Don't worry about that. Yeah, no, I'm glad you brought up safe space. I want to circle back to that because I think that's an important one. Jennifer, how about you? Tell us about what you've been doing with Life.School.House.
Um, sure. I'm carrying the story for a lot of different people now, and I'm so glad that Brynn and John went first because like there's a lot of bad news in the world right now, but these are stories of like people when we come together, we can get some really impressive things done. And I think that that's what happened with the Life Schoolhouse, which is a cooperative nonprofit. For the record, this was not supposed to be a thing. Life Schoolhouse was born in my living room. I have two kids. We were living in a new neighborhood. I didn't know anybody. Like to me, the safety of raising these children is going to come from how well I know the people around me and how safe that environment is for me as a mom, for them as kids. So we actually, at the early stages of Life Schoolhouse, just opened up our home as a bit of a shared space for skills exchange. So people in the neighborhood who happen to be good at weaving or carving or baking or sewing or curing bacon. That was one of my favorite workshops. And you know, the it was a way of saying the space is available. Let's offer workshops where we get to know each other by way of doing things together. So the Life Schoolhouse really just came from a place of like, come, my kids are going to be here on a Saturday. Let's do workshops on the afternoons of a Saturday afternoon and see what can be how we can get to know each other differently and lean in on the skills that exist in our community. We had so much fun though, like a hoot to use Andy's word from earlier. I think well, we did well over 50 workshops in the first year in my living room, in my kitchen. So you name it, we pretty much covered it. And it was just tremendous to surface the assets that exist in a community in terms of skills that are held, that come from newcomer Canadians, that come from youth who would come and teach, you know, friendship bracelet making, or, you know, elders who are like, I learned this from my grandmother. And when we were so busy with these workshops, we had a knock on the door and someone said, "Can I do this at my house too?" And the answer was absolutely, please do. And it led to us working together, forming the cooperative, developing a sense for like, what is the magic sauce here? Like, what is it that makes this work? And helping others get similar communities of learning, shared learning started. Bob mentioned these are all barter-based initiatives. There was never any monetary exchange, nothing charged to participate in the programs. People would gift items to the facilitator who came to teach. They would exchange something human to human to honor the time and the talent that that person is offering with their skill and community. And we ran and continue to run as a barter-based organization since 2018. So that's been wonderful. The expansion of the program and understanding kind of how to like what is our like how is it what is working here? It really doesn't seem to matter what workshop title is or what the content of the workshop is. People were coming together because they were lonely. So it shifted the way that we were thinking about skills sharing, to Brynn's point about, you know, safe spaces, and to Dawn's point about like this is her community taking care of each other. Most of the people were coming and continue to come to Life Schoolhouse community events because they're looking for connection. If they happen to also learn how to weave a rug that can serve in their home as a useful resource, great. But they're here because they wanted someone to talk to and connect with. So I can certainly share more about that as we go. But the Life Schoolhouse continues to be available as the model itself is shared freely into the commons. We encourage anyone to download the book that we wrote as a community. It's very much a collaborative cooperative, and happy to answer kind of any questions about what it is we're up to.
That's fantastic, Jen. And I should say everybody should check the chat box. There's some links in there for all three of these, and some really good information there. I think what I'd first like to start out with, Brynn and Dawn, you mentioned safe space. Brynn for queer, trans, and disabled people, and Dawn particularly for Indigenous youth and the learning language along with skills there. And Jen, also, really, it strikes me that neighbors, learning that they exist, who is your neighbor? And, how do I get to know them? That sort of thing. So I'll leave it up to any one of you, the three of you, give me your thoughts on what is the importance and the value of creating safe spaces like that.
I'll go. Um, for me, with the youth that I work with, one of the biggest things, and especially when it comes to language, and I can't speak from the Indigenous perspective, but I can speak from what I see as not being being non-Indigenous in those settings. I find that if, for the language part anyways, and just youth in general, sometimes they get to the point where they feel like they should know it all. They think they know it all, but they feel like they should know it all, if that makes sense. And so then when people will say different things to them, like even for my own children, if we go to a different community and somebody starts speaking Mi'kmaq to them, they kind of like hold back and they will respond in English because they're not confident enough to speak the language, what they know of it. Now on a scale of 1 to 10, a 10 being fluent speaker, my children are like a 1, right? We're just learning, we're just at the beginning of that. And I think it's really important to create that safe space so people can be vulnerable, because I think when you're vulnerable, that's when the learning happens. For my particular, situation, it's okay to say the word wrong. It's okay to make a mistake when you're learning how to fillet a fish. Like it's okay to do those sort of things. And if you don't create that safe space, then I feel like, especially youth, if they don't trust you, they're not going to do it. They're not going to step outside and be able to take that attempt or attempt to do it. They'll sit back and they'll just kind of keep to themselves and like, oh yeah, I know how to do it. So I think it's really important to create that safe space for learning to happen myself.
Okay, interesting. Brynn, what would your thoughts be on this?
Yeah, I think that it just seems important for similar reasons. Like I know that it might seem, I don't know if it seems surprising or not, but some folks who came out, like there can be some nervousness stepping into rural spaces. Because of where we're situated, we had folks come from the South Shore, from the Valley, and also from the city, and rural spaces can feel intimidating to folks who aren't there every day. And so being able to come into that space and learn skills in a place where it feels like you can just show up as your full self and you have shared experiences with the people around you is really helpful. And it feels like practice. Like I really feel like we saw a difference from the first day to the last day in people's comfort at the space with each other. Maybe this is a small example even, but like we helped folks coordinate ride shares out to the events. And in a rural space, for a lot of folks, the idea that an adult doesn't drive would be really surprising, but that's not actually that uncommon in the queer community. And so just I think the idea that it was a closed space, people were able to like navigate those things that might have made them a bit more nervous in a way that felt more comfortable.
I like how you describe that, show up as your full self. And Dawn, as you were saying, that people can relax and you learn much better in a sort of a non-judgmental environment that way. Jen, any thoughts from your
Um,
experience?
yeah, I've been thinking about it as we go, because safety, we started this program in a city. I mean, Halifax is not a large city, but it is very possible for you to pass the same person every day sitting beside them on the bus or walking down the sidewalk and not know who they are, know nothing about them, but like be sharing space. And what I found that was really different, and I think it was the invitation that was very intentional. Like I was out in my community, literally like knocking on doors and harassing people at farmers markets and being like, "This thing is beautiful. Could you teach 5 or 6 people how to do this? Because I think you're very brilliant." And a lot of times people will be like, "Well, I'm not a teacher. Like I can do the thing, but I don't know how to teach it." And you're like, "But that's that's okay. Like think small, couple of people, they're going to ask you some questions. We're going to work on something together. Would you be up for that?" And you could watch people come into a space like that as the facilitators, and their confidence would grow like 6 sizes. And I'm thinking in particular about a workshop where we had a young man who was only living in Canada for less than a year, and he came and he did a cooking class for us in my kitchen. He was from China, and he reached out and said, "I want to challenge myself. I've been trying to learn English, and I want to challenge myself to come in and show things that I love, the food, my culture." But my language skills are not strong, and so but he was brave and he did the thing. And we prepped all the materials, and people came in. And don't you know, there was a person who was like well into her 70s, teeny tiny little lady, fluent in Mandarin. Who knew? And she and he made this deep connection, and he found a person, and they connect. She had lived in China for many, many years when she was much younger, and they had more in common than they realized. And she sought this out because she wanted to get back into the food culture and the language that she missed so much. And he felt like he wasn't alone any longer in that community space. She was able to connect him with others as well that she knew that just like in our tiny neighborhood, when we reveal even just little pieces of ourselves to each other, the magic of connection that in the way that that addresses this deep kind of loneliness of not being seen and not really seeing each other in community is it's a special kind of medicine that heals across the board. I mean, I've taken probably 16 sourdough baking classes over like we've done like 4,000 some odd workshops across Nova Scotia in the last number of years. I host a lot of these sourdough baking classes before it was cool to make sourdough in the pandemic. We were already talking about sourdough. I'm terrible at baking bread, but I know now so many people who are really good at it. And I, as a neighbor, don't have to be good at everything because I know who to call for bread. And I know who to call that can fix my shoe. And I know who to call who is an amazing chef of delicious Chinese food. Like there's safety in that too, in not having to be individual in our creation of our little lives. To be more collective in it means that I don't have to try and be good at everything. And that's a large piece of safety for me too.
That's great stories that you tell. And I think you're absolutely right that we don't have to be, well, we can't be expert in everything. There's a lot of everythings out there. But to know who is, and that really gets into kind of assets, knowing the assets in your community and how do you define your community? Is it your neighbor? It could be your church group. It could be just about anything. I describe it as kind of overlapping Venn diagrams of different communities that we're all part of. And knowing who can do what, I think, is an important one. But speaking of who can do what, one of the questions I want to ask, I'm getting the feeling that there's more and more hunger out there in the world for people to learn basic stuff like this. We give some examples, cordage, we talked about backyard butchering, a lot of different things. Of course, sourdough bread, and there's dozens and dozens of different kinds of skills. Why do you think, I'll throw it out to any one of you, why do you think it's important for people to learn basic skills? What are the benefits?
Hmm.
I don't want to put you on the spot.
No, I can lean in on that one because I mean, we've just done so many of these exact types of workshops where the skill development is the thing that kind of calls people into togetherness. Um, I, I mean, there's no extra, but there is always enough if you lean into community. So we might be struggling um, to Dawn's point about food sovereignty versus food security. Like there, to meet the basic needs in community, we do have assets like food banks and we do have community gardens and we have these things, but there's something that is that next level of food sovereignty or sovereignty of the kind of the individual, and that to me comes from yeah, learning these skills so that you can put them into play for yourself. One of the things that has really been helpful when we really started doing a lot of workshops, we had people now who have these skills within our community. So, for instance, when we did an intro to knitting class, all of a sudden everybody's making dishcloths because they're squares. So you're going to knit an awful lot of dishcloths before you start a sweater. And you gift these dishcloths to your mom and your neighbor and your friends. And pretty soon, like nobody needs more dishcloths, but you're still practicing. So you're just like they're accumulating. And the same is true for the spoon carving and for all the things. So we started these things called makers swaps. And every month for 4 years, I don't know if I've missed more than three or four of them in years. Every month in multiple places, especially here in Nova Scotia, but these maker swaps happen as spaces where people who have created these things can trade them on a barter basis with others in their community. And to me, the community has grown because of this. People are experimenting, they're learning from each other, seeing what comes up at a maker swap, going home, trying it, creating new things, bringing them back to the swap. They are like non-monetary farmers markets. Anything that you would see that shows up at a farmers market, candles and soap and craft and yogurt and bread and jam and pickles, like these are the things that show up at these maker swaps. And people are starting to think about wealth differently and what enough looks like. And knowing who makes really good pickles is knowing where, like, what wealth looks like. And I think that's what's been really important for people in terms of skill development is learning and having a position in community that other people value because they know that you're the person that makes the really good pickles. So it positions people in community. It forms deep connection. People get excited about making things and then sharing them. Hmm.
That's great. That's great. I thank you for that. Thank you for that. I love all the stories of all of the swapping that can happen because you're absolutely right. It really kind of that's how you leverage, I think, community skills so everybody benefits from the different skills. I do want to say, don't hesitate to put questions in the chat box. Nike is going to be monitoring those, and we will have time at the end go through any questions that you've got. I would like to, Dawn and Brynn, you both mentioned there's an agricultural part to this, growing things. And I know from personal experience that people love to get together and grow stuff together. There's that common learning, they learn all the little tricks of the trade. No matter how long you've been doing it, you're always learning more. You're getting a little better all the time. How about if you speak to that? What's your experience with, it may not be a formal class on a particular type of growing skill, but just doing it together and the ability to learn together. Any thoughts on that?
Maybe this is a bit of a mix answering this question and the last one as well. But I think that like the skills we were doing are maybe slightly more removed from like life skills. But to me, it's about like trying something new in a group and like maybe not being very good at it or like maybe discovering your new passion and it being a space for experimentation and creativity and like getting to do that in a group of people who are all kind of in it together feels really special. And then as Jennifer's saying, like the connections that come out of that. But more specifically to this question, I don't know. I mean, I personally am a grower, and I just think plants are just amazing. And people get really excited, I think, getting to be in spaces where we're intentionally noticing how plants are growing, choosing a plant that you're going to then take back and use in your cyanotype print. And I don't know, it's fun. And I think people are really drawn to that aspect of it.
Dawn, how
So
about you? Go ahead.
So with me and the youth, my little background story, some of you might already know it. Ulnooweg Education Center was able to bring in 5 different greenhouses into communities a few years back. But with that, I found that we had these big, beautiful greenhouses with climate batteries, and they were amazing, but we didn't have, communities didn't have the capacity to grow. So when we did this program and I first started working with them, I took a step back and said, okay, it's great to have these greenhouses, but we need to learn how to grow,
Yeah.
right? And then we did have a few people in community that were growing, and they were growing these huge, great big, like 30-foot rows of Swiss chard. And just before Fiona had stopped at one of the communities, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is so beautiful. Like, look at how much Swiss chard you guys have. And I said, what are you going to do with it? Because they were all harvesting it. And they're like, we're throwing it in the compost. And I was like almost twitching. I'm like, compost? What do you mean you throw it in the compost? And the remark was, people don't know what to do with it.
Yep.
So then I was like, oh, okay. So I said, there was a 30-foot row of tomatoes right beside it. And I tell the story often. And I was like, oh, well, that's great. So people know what to do with tomatoes. What are you guys going to do with a 30-foot row of tomatoes? Because you got to harvest those too. And they're like, compost. And again, I started twitching because I'm like, compost. Like, how can we do this? And the gentleman that was growing it said, Dawn, I don't have the capacity to store it. I don't have a place to put it. I can't throw it in the freezer. I don't have freezer space. I can't process this amount, so quickly. So again, I take another step back. And it's kind of funny because you start a job or you start a program and you think you're going to move ahead and move ahead and move ahead. But with this, I felt like I was always taking a step back. So we would do one thing. Oh, no, we got to back it up a little bit. And nope, we got to back it up again. And we come to the point of a lot of the skills that we teach are the preservation skills and things like that, because it's great to learn how to grow, but if you don't know what to do with it afterwards, you're kind of stuck. And I know myself, my way of thinking is I want to have all of the skills. I want to learn how to do everything. I don't have to do everything, but I want to learn how to do everything, because if there's ever a moment that I need to do it, I have a little bit of an idea of the process, and I could probably figure the rest out if I forget something. But I find it's the same thing with the youth. Once we start growing in the youth, like farmers market gardens and the youth, just the community gardens, as soon as they start to, they're like sponges. They want to know everything. And it's kind of weird because I taught in the public school for 5 years, and I'm fighting with kids to learn stuff, the curriculum that the government has set out. And then I get this position and I go in and I have kids that first they want to be there because I have a paid position. So they want to make the money. And I get that. You're 16. Of course you want to make the money, right? But then once the learning starts, I don't have to do anything. Like, they just go and they just want to absorb everything, and they're constantly asking questions. And I had this one girl, Skyland, we would, as a group with the youth, we would be over here doing something, whether it be raking or shoveling or moving soil or whatever we were doing. And she was over here on the bench, and I'd go over and I'm like, Skyland, like, are you going to come help us? And she's like, but I got this book, Dawn, and I want to look at it. And so I had brought the square foot gardening book, and I had it there, and I had the market garden book there. And I told them, anytime you want to check it out and, do this sort of stuff or look at it, if you have questions, if I'm not around, go look for it. And it was like, as soon as she picked up that book, she wanted to try everything in her own little personal garden. So each youth that participated with us had their own 4x8 garden. And then we had a big plot that we kind of try to do for like the community, grow for community. So because I want to create a space where if they're interested in something, they can go and explore and engage and see what works. If you want to do all sunflowers, do all sunflowers. That's you, right? Um, they had the freedom to choose. And I think that was a big thing. So with that, here I have one over here on the bench doing her own research, right? Like I don't have to teach her. She's doing her own research. And then at the end of the summer too, she came up to me and she was like, Dawn, there's a camp at Dalhousie University that they're putting on at the Ag campus. Like I was gonna go, but I'm not sure. Like she was worried about losing hours. So I talked to my COO, Chris, and I said, can we still pay her? And he's like, not a problem. So we still paid her her summer job pay, and she got to go on to Dalhousie and got to do a lot of this agricultural type stuff. And she absolutely loved it. So I think creating that space, even like I said, with youth, with planting, it's growing, and they're not only growing plant, but they're growing themselves, right? And it's just, it's really, I know this is probably a corny pun, but it's really nice to see them blossom, right? And to do the things that they're interested in. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh,
I think it's amazing.
that's a great point. You guys are planting seeds, not to use an analogy for this time of year, but you're creating sparks, particularly in younger generations, and you never know what's going to light up where the passion is. A spark turns into a flame. I can think of a young lad that I know who took some kind of a skills course in shoe repair and went on to becoming a shoemaker. He just absolutely loved it, these kind of fancy custom shoes and stuff. So you never know what's going to happen, and it's a responsibility out there teaching like this. And so that's one of the questions I've got is you've worked with a lot of teachers, you yourselves are teachers. What's the motivation there? Why put out the effort? Why, when you bring in somebody to help teach, what's their motivation? Why are they willing to do it?
We'll jump on there. Um, Everybody here has a garden. Oh, I don't know. I'm not going to assume everybody has a garden, but if you have a garden, how do you feel at the end of the season when you have like an overabundance of zucchini? You want to share, you want to give it out, you want to give it to everybody, right? And I think you have a proud moment. And I think it's the same when we do these things and you see that youth or see that person to be able to like when the light bulbs go on. Do you know what I mean? Like it's just so much. I get joy out of seeing them succeed. I think is the type of person I am. And when I work with Ernest, one of the things that he does the same thing. He loves working with youth. But one of the major things or the major reason why he does this is because he feels like they are the ones to keep things going, right? Like if we get them involved and get them interested when they're younger, they're going to carry on these skills. They're going to carry on this knowledge. And he just, like I said, it's almost like when kids are little, um, they have a creative side to them. And you see your children and they're doing this and they're so proud of that picture that stick man picture that they wrote or they drew or whatever. And you put it on the fridge and it makes them it builds up their confidence. It just makes everybody happy. It's just a positive thing. And I think Ernest thinks that when we click into that or capture that willingness to learn, that creativity, it's going to go on and on because they're proud and they have that confidence and they're just busting at the seams and they want to share. They want to share what they do. So if we can hone in on that, I think that's one of the major reasons why I do it anyways.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, I can chime in on that too, because I think I get it. I get it, John. That's absolutely why I'm involved in a lot of the spaces that I am. But we've had an experience where a lot of the people that we invite to be teachers have like a humility around their knowledge that actually is a barrier for them becoming like being able to share. It's almost as if we've been cultured to think that a teacher is a person who is accredited and has some sort of piece of paper or somebody has appointed them as the person who is the knowledge keeper who gets to share. And so this idea of skills sharing in community has been a reach for a lot of people because we're like, no, like you learned this by watching a YouTube video or sitting at your grandmother's knee or doing it the hard way and breaking it the first 12 times and then you figured out like however you acquired the knowledge, you have something that others value. So we've actually had to encourage people to think of themselves as being able to share a skill forward. So that was an interesting piece of it. And because it's all barter, our initiative is all barter. When someone is brave and we wrap around supports, we're hosting them well. There's always two people at Life.School.House. There's never just a facilitator. There's always a host who stands beside them and supports them and ensures that the community connection is actually happening. So they're not abandoned to facilitate entirely alone. That makes a difference. And then at the end of it, they receive gifts that are heartfelt that come from the people who are attending. It's not $5. It might be a jar of jam. It might be your grandmother's chocolate chip cookie recipe, or it might be, something, a flower that you picked on the way. Like it doesn't have to be a big purchase of an item. It is something that comes from my humanity to your humanity. And I've had people say like, this is better than Christmas. Like my cup overfloweth. And so we've had to encourage people to try. And then when they catch the spirit of the sharing, they're like addicts. They will come back. They will do it again and again. I think often these types of webinars can be a bit sunshine and roses. If it's okay, I'd like to introduce a bit of a shadow to this though, too, is that it doesn't always work out the way that you expect it to. So to Dawn's point of like, you can have all the right assets in the world and you build the beautiful greenhouse and you grow the thing and they end up throwing it in the garbage. Like, sometimes when you're working with community, things don't necessarily, you don't learn always what you think you're going to learn. So we also have, because it's a co-op, different members will start different projects under the banner of Life.School.House. And we have a lot of community gardens that are out in the world. And one in particular in Dartmouth, I spend a lot of time helping build and the community who was so passionate about get the grant and build the boxes and plant the vegetables and because it was Life.School.House and teach the canning classes and teach these drying mechanisms, solar drying and all of these things that are wrapped around it, that's great, but nobody wanted to show up and water, especially when it's really hot, especially when they were this one's on vacation, that one's like getting people to water, getting people to weed, getting people to do the less sexy fun stuff was hard, and the community actually had to figure out how to do that.
Interesting. Yeah.
And it wasn't easy, and it's like we don't have a lot of places where we can practice being in conflict and working our way through it. And that learning was actually really important. And that learning, like, how do you not just abandon the community garden? How do we get through this to the other side of, like, what happens when people take all of your tomatoes? Like how do we work through that? It wasn't learning that we were excited to pursue and be like, we're going to be a conflict management service in our community. But boy, like if you are intentional about building community, these things are going to come up, and that's actually part of the work too.
Yeah, I agree. It's part of the work too. And it's the learning moments. And I think, to get through that, it's really what builds the trust and the connection within the community.
Mhm.
There's no questions, I don't think, Nike, but I think we're good because I've got a few more questions.
I can add to that one before we
Please
move
do,
on.
Brynn.
I was
Yeah.
just going to say that I think we had some similar experiences that Jennifer's describing, where the folks we asked to share skills were at first hesitant about like, oh, but I'm not a professional in this. And I think but I think like teaching and learning are really like different sides of the same coin. And I think that folks who shared skills learned by having to teach them. Like I know for myself, teaching the paper making, like I had to think about it differently when faced with how do you transmit this knowledge to somebody else, and how do you answer the questions you're getting about the why you're doing it this way and how you're doing it, and well, what if this happens? So I think that that's also a really valuable piece of it, and just that in our initiative we also really intentionally paired skill shares together so that each day had two. So the intention was that everyone who was sharing a skill was also participating in somebody else's skill share, which I think is like a really nice way to communicate some of these values around we all have something to teach, and separating some of those ideas of like an expert teacher like Jennifer was saying, and more about like, well, what are you really nerdy about, and like what gets you feeling like so curious that you've spent all this time diving in that you could talk about to other people.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're right, Brynn. And the thought struck me that in many ways, the three of you are also coaches because you're working with other teachers and you're like, I think, Jennifer, you mentioned the word humility there. There's a lot of knowledge that people hold and they don't necessarily want to bring it out. So it's really coaching those people, giving them the confidence that they can come and teach, just like you were trying to figure out, Brynn, how do you teach one of those skills? Um, what I would like to do is ask each of you, why do you personally do this? What motivates you to put out all the time and the energy?
I can start. I feel like this Skillshare project is just like such a small piece of this of Crows Commons cooperative, which feels like a big part of what I'm doing with my life. So I think about that a lot. And I think for me, it's as simple as like I'm trying to build the community that I want to live in, both like literally in terms of there's like a housing component to this, and also in terms of like helping shape a rural space that I want to live in, and I want other people to be participating in this with me. Like I don't know if that makes sense, but like it's coming from an in perspective of like I'm willing to put so much time and energy into this because I want to benefit from the world that it creates, and I want other people to also get to experience that.
That's fantastic. Thank you.
I have to agree. But the first off, I do it because I get paid. Uh,
Oh, come
that's
on,
just a
Dawn.
benefit.
There's a lot more to it than that, I can tell.
Oh, there is, because trust me, some days I'm just like, why do I do this? And then I remember exactly why I do it, and that's what keeps me going. I mean, don't get me wrong, I love my organization, but I'm one person in my department. So I do all the things, which is great, but I don't mind doing the crappy stuff because I think I get more out of the good stuff, right? Like you always talk about balancing stuff. I don't think I'm balanced. I think the crappy stuff, I get more out of the good stuff than I do. So that's why I don't mind doing the other stuff. But I think the biggest thing is I think it's my personality is why I do these sort of stuff. A long time ago, like I have a quick story. Philip, my other half, had come to me, and I did the whole gardening thing. I worked for Lloyd Mappleback for a couple of years, and then after that, I was like, I don't want to be like seasonal my whole life. I want a job that I can do all the time, right? All the year. So Philip said, you should be a teacher. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to be a teacher. I can't stand kids. Like, I don't want to be in a classroom with teacher, blah, 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 blah. So then I went on and I actually applied for RCMP and I got shut down. I waited all the way to the end and she has said, no, I'm not going to let you go on. I'm like, okay, fine. You know what? Everything happens for a reason. I don't know what the reason is right now, but I'll figure it out later. And I always thought if I end up going the RCMP route, I would be with youth at risk. I just always thought that. I felt it, I guess. And then Philip's like, you need to be a teacher. And I'm like, no, I don't like kids. And he's like, but you do. He said, every time you go out into the yard and our kids are there and you're digging worms, he said, you're not just digging worms, you're always teaching them the anatomy of a worm. Or, it's always that one step more with me. Um, and when they get it, I love it. So I decided to go this way and I went in and took my Bachelor of Education. And like I said, I was in public school system for 5 years, but I get more out of this sharing. But I'm not always the teacher is the big thing too. It's not up to me to teach everything. It's up to me to create the space for the sharing and the teaching to happen. And I get more gratification, more, I don't know, I just love it. It makes my heart happy. So I think that's why.
Okay, creating the space. Jen, how about you?
Um, I do this work because I can't not do this work. I think it's like a trauma response. Like capitalism is it's very wearing on my soul. And maybe that's personality type, but like most of the isms super wearing on my soul, and I am not like an angry protest movement activist, but my way of being in this world is my form of resistance. Um, I would say that a therapist would dive into that and be like, that trauma response is super unhealthy and you should probably work on that. Instead of, getting to the bottom of the why, I'm just doing all
Yeah.
the things. This
Okay.
helps. This
Yeah.
helps. I think it helps the world.
Yeah.
And it fills the bucket back up again so we can just keep going. Like
It,
it's,
it, it definitely fills the world. We've got a couple of minutes, and I want a real quick first thought. What would you say to encourage others to do this kind of work?
oh, I'll go first because I think about this all the time. But it does not have to be big work. Every tiny little thing that we try is better than not trying. So the work that you can do in community with one person matters. Just start.
Just start. Okay. Brynn, Dawn, any thoughts?
I have to say the same thing. Just try it,
Just do
right?
it.
If you don't like it, don't continue, but try it because you'll be surprised at what or how it makes you feel once you start. It becomes addictive.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if I have much to add to that other than like go towards what feels exciting for you. And I think that's a really good foot in the door. So if there's like a particular skill that you feel really jazzed about, or there's a particular group of people that is going to make you feel really excited, that's always a good place to start.
Okay. Well, I want to thank the three of you. This has been absolutely fascinating discussion. And I'm really glad it got recorded. There's going to be a lot of other people that really want to hear this and some really good, valuable information. Dawn, you've got your hand up.
I do because I just see that there was a question in the chat, and I mean, I'm okay to stay on and continue this conversation for a few extra minutes if everybody else is. I just don't want somebody to not have their question answered.
Okay. Nike, do you see it?
I do. I can read it out if you like.
Yeah, why don't you go ahead? Before you do that, if some people have to leave, I just want to encourage you to sign up for our newsletter and you'll be informed of upcoming webinars. We've got some really nice topics planned next month. I think we're going to do community fridges. And we're going to be getting more and more into action-oriented types of themes going into the summer. But go ahead, Nike.
Okay, the question is, you're all creating spaces where people can be seen and can see, where reskilling is about connection. How do you protect that from the pressures to prove impact on terms that weren't set by the community?
Protecting that from pressure to prove impact.
I I could step in. Like I laugh because that is so on the nose of why we started it as a barter-based initiative. Because if you as soon as you take money to do a thing, as soon as you invite money in, um, things can get really complicated because you now owe reports to the funder, um, you owe translation of what you're doing into their language as opposed to the language of your community, and that's been a huge barrier for grassroots community-led projects of this nature, to not twist and change, but yet to also be able to articulate in the language that the listener is going to have about why this matters, right? To keep going and to invite in funding and to invite in support for this kind of thing that is a question that is on the nose. I don't know that we've necessarily figured it out, but I do think that we've found a way to invite in partnership, and we've been very clear on what types of funding we're not interested in partnering, in working with or chasing. Too much energy drained from community that we would rather spend on doing the work in community. So how do you protect from the pressure to prove impact? I think like you don't participate in it until your idea is of a size that you actually really need to. Like I think a lot of people think, I want to do this thing in my community. I got to go find the money to do the thing. That's not the first step. Like we ran Life.School.House with $5 for over a year because it takes $5 to open a bank account. Like it was literally, let's figure out where the mason jars in our community and use those mason jars to do canning classes. Like you don't, if you don't start from money, you don't have to meet the expectation, and it keeps the pressure low so that your tiny little seed can grow without getting squashed or twisted like a watermelon they grow in a box. Have you seen those? Like bleh. Um, anyway, that's one way that we've protected our growth, and we intentionally tried not to scale up for the sake of like do more, because it did beget needing resources that we weren't willing to take on until we were really ready to defend ourselves and our intentions against the pressures that come from investment in that way.
That's important experience. Thank you very much. It's really key. Brynn, Dawn?
I can add, I think that what you shared really speaks to me, Jennifer, like that tension there in this particular project, because we did receive grant funding to support it. I think one strategy we used is we had a really participatory grant writing experience where we put the idea out to our community to make sure that we were on the right track and make sure that it's what people wanted. And then we're really transparent about that project. So I think that's something we did ahead of time to make sure things were really in line. And then I think it's just that tension between what you were saying, like using those skills to talk in the language that people want to hear, um, and also simultaneously learning to to stand steadfast about the impacts that your own community cares about. I don't know, balancing those two things.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm probably on the other side of all this because I can only do this through finding funding and grants and things like that. Um, but I kind of understand where Jennifer's coming from, and I understand where Brynn's coming from. Like I go back to the community to see what the community wants. I can write the proposal and get the funding, but in the end, I'm very adamant when it comes to community voice. It's the community voice. It's not like it doesn't matter what I say, it's what they want. And I'm the type of person that I kind of look at the different proposals that are out there and see if either the funder or the proposal works or has the same intentions of what we're trying to do. So I don't go and apply for the funding that is looking to, maybe there's an organization out there that's just looking to get their name out there. Like, look what we do. We do this, we do this, we do this. Like that's not what I look for. I look for the funding agreements, or the funders, I should say, and the different proposals that I can put out there that have the same values and morals and beliefs and intentions as that we do at Ulnooweg Education Center. And I think when you start to do that, then it becomes a little bit easier because in the end, you all have that same end goal, right? And so I don't feel like I have to protect as much because I still have to do the reporting 100%. But even when I do the reporting, I just show the pictures and I allow the participants to tell their stories, right? It's not my story to tell, it's their story to tell.
Yeah, very good. I'm glad we were able to address that question. Very important one. Maybe I see some people are still hanging in there. One thing that might be good, Nike, if I could lean on you to talk about community of practice. This is a piece of work that CLP is undertaking. If you could tell us a little bit about what that's about.
Absolutely. Community of practice right now is a way for CLP to engage folks who are in the community wealth building relocalization world. So essentially, if you're doing something to try to build wealth in your local community, this is a community of practice is a peer learning space, essentially. So it's where we come together, we have conversations, we share resources. You can build connections with other people in the Atlantic provinces doing work similar to you or working with similar types of problems. So we meet for an hour on the first Thursday of the month at noon. So it's sort of a lunchtime thing. And so it'll be happening next week. And I put the link in the chat as a way to sign up. but I'll also send a link out to our newsletter. So if you were able to find this webinar, you'll hopefully be able to find the community of practice.
Okay, so everybody that's listening in, now you've got to book 2 Thursdays. There's the first Thursday for the community of practice and the last Thursday for these webinars. So there we go. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody. This has been fantastic. And tell everybody you know that the recording is going to be on the website if they want to plug in and hear everything that's going on. And Brynn, Dawn, Jennifer, very deep thanks both to the three of you and for this fantastic conversation that we've had.
Wonderful. Thanks, everyone. So lovely to hang out.